Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Scrutiny Committee for Place and the Environment. Item number 1, to note substitutes in accordance with Council Procedures, Rule 4. We have substituting for us tonight Councillor Hicks and Councillor Eaves in place of Councillor Rees and Councillor Edwards. So note those substitutes. And item number 2, to receive apologies for absence, and we have apologies from Councillor Edwards and Councillor Rees. Item 3, to receive declarations of interest from members in respect of any matter on the agenda. If anyone has any, please would they register their interest through the microphones. We have none, so thank you for that. And item number 4, to be agreed by general information. So if you're happy with them, please say agreed. Are we happy to agree the minutes of the previous meeting held on 28th of June 2003? Agreed. So those minutes are agreed. Item 5, to consider any items that the chairman agrees to take as urgent business. We have none. So we'll move on to the more substantive parts of the agenda. Before we do, obviously we've got the members of the committee here. We'd also like to welcome the members of the Cabinet who have joined us this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance. And I should say, for those who don't know me, my name is Councillor John Belsey. I'm Chairman of the committee, and Vice Chairman next to me is Councillor Bert Green. So item 6, Sustainable Economic Strategy, the review after the first year. And I'd like to hand over to Judy Holmes, who will, I wasn't exactly sure which title to use, so it's Deputy Chief Executive who will present on this item.
Thank you, Chair. The Scrutiny Committee will see that you're being asked to endorse the progress that the Council have made in respect to delivering the Sustainable Economy Strategy in 2022-23. So this gives you information about that specific financial year 22-23. And of course, we are continuing to make progress and we're continuing to deliver the strategy. And we will be reporting the outcome of this year's to you next financial year. So you'll see that, just to remind ourselves, the Council agreed the Sustainable Economic Strategy back in 2022. And the Appendix 1, which can be found at pages, I think it's 14 to 40, provides you with a detailed outline of the achievements that we've made since the strategy was adopted in 2022. You'll remember that there are 52 actions in the strategy, in the action plan, which are there to deliver the 14 objectives. The committee will note that there's been significant progress, I hope you will agree, and you'll see that some of the key achievements that we've made during the year are outlined for you at pages 12 and 13. I'm supported today by Sally and Lara, who would be happy to help you discuss the matters in the action plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. We're happy to take any questions from members about the plan, but also we'd like our Scrutiny Committee to make sure we understand our vision, the strategy, and so if you've got any wider comments on the vision and strategy, they will be welcomed as well. We can see where the discussion takes us, but we've got the papers in front of us. Would anyone like to raise any points in respect of what we've just heard in the report? Councillor Hemwood, please.
Sorry, Chairman, how are we going to progress through this? Because I've actually read through the index and have several points, several queries to make. So is that how we will proceed? I would certainly, to start off with, on page 12, I do have a question on page 12 under key achievements. Obviously, the last little dot under 5, when it talks about improved cycleways and active travel. So I would like to know what progress has been made in active travel by bicycle between Haywards Heath and Burgess Hill, please.
Have you got other points as well, Councillor Henwood?
I've got, yeah.
Yeah, well,
yes.
rather than just keep, would you want to maybe maybe say three now, and then we can take those all, otherwise it will be a lot of backwards and forwards.
Oh, well, I haven't got a question on every item, but on some I have quite, okay, on the index.
Yeah, please carry on, yeah.
Okay, so on page 16 in the index, when we talk about measure, maintain mid-Sussex position, I'm not too sure when it talks about level 4 and level 3, I'm not too sure which is highest. Are we talking, which is highest, level 4 or level 3? Okay, Chairman. Oh, yes, on page 20 in the index, under point number 10, when it talks about Sussex clubs for young people, it is my understanding that no longer functions, and I'm wondering what happens next. Is that will do for now?
Yep, yeah, I think that will do for now. It's just,
Okay,
it will
thank
just
you.
hopefully allow the conversation to flow a bit smoother.
Okay, thank you.
Would someone from the officer team like to reply on behalf of those once you've gathered your thoughts? Thank you, Judy Holmes.
Thank you. You'll see in page 23, action 16, we detail the activity that's been undertaken in 2022-23 in respect to active travel.
But my specific question was to do with the cycle between Haywards Heath and Burgess Hill.
Yeah, so you, if that's okay, Chair, the committee may or may not be aware that we've been working for some time to try to secure a route using place and connectivity funding to secure a route between Burgess Hill and Haywards Heath. And unfortunately, we haven't been successful in being able to identify a route that we can deliver, that is deliverable and that provides good value for money in respect to the place on connectivity work. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to progress that specific route at this time.
Can I just add, I think that came to council last council meeting as well, and we had a specific, I think probably Councillor Eaves either proposed or seconded it, and I know that's something that we are continuing to press for and to review, so it is something that we haven't forgotten about as a council and are looking to continue to achieve. Does someone want to take on the other points, please? Thank you, Lara Southam.
Thank you very much. So just in response to the second question, level 3 and level 4 is higher. So level 3 is equivalent to an A level, and level 4 is equivalent to a degree, a bachelor's degree. And your third question in terms of the Sussex clubs for young people, yes, absolutely. During the summer, unfortunately, yes, they went into administration. A couple of points within that. So that is identified as a project within the UK SPF Investment Fund, as it's noted here. And officers are already working with all the relevant remaining stakeholders to try and ensure that can go ahead. So that work is still happening to try and make that community hub come to fruition. And in terms of the funding, it was for year 3, so that money is still with us. It hasn't been spent or lost on the back of that. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and obviously please feel free to come back, Councillor Henwood, but in the meantime, Councillor Eaves.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on the active travel, I do hope this will stay on the agenda because it is the will of full council, as expressed, that we do something about the active travel routes. And even if it's not possible to have a route through Heathlands, I hope we can somehow choose some other route because that really would help with modal shift. We're not very happy with the LC whips, which were approved in March. We don't think they're very good, to be honest. And it would be really good, I think, if we could have a working group to look at those again. And is there any chance of clawing them back and resubmitting them? Because certainly the one in Burgess Hill, it looks like a lot of coloured lines along main roads, and it doesn't even sometimes on the map reflect the current situation in terms of the excellent place and connectivity lanes which have been added. So it's not taking into account what cyclists actually do already, avoiding the main roads. So we would like to see some kind of task and finish group on that if possible. Like Councillor Henwood, I have lots of other points.
Thank you, Kath. I think Julie Cox will reply in the first instance.
With respect to active travel, I think we need to make it clear that this is a 3-year action plan. We're only in year 1. This will not disappear off the agenda. This will continue to be an action in the action plan until the strategy is reviewed. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is that we, as Councillor Belsey has already indicated, we are aware of the views, given the debate that happened at Council and the motion, and we have undertaken to write to the County Council in respect to their active travel strategy and to respond to the consultation exercise that they're undertaking to share the views of the council, and we will continue to do that. With respect to the LC whips, you will remember that we carried out the work to support the LC whips on behalf of the County Council, and it is actually a function of the County Council to identify, prepare and deliver active travel routes. And so we were supporting them in undertaking that work on their behalf. They have to submit their plans to the Department of Transport for their agreement, and clearly they will need to identify routes that are A, deliverable, and B, are affordable. And clearly there will be priorities that the county will need to consider, and we will be actively asking them as part of our response to the consultation that they ensure that they give priority to the routes in Mid-Sussex, but specifically to the Burgess Hill and Haywards Heath route. I don't know if Sally wanted to add anything. I think Sally would like to, Chairman, if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to add to that, obviously the district plan review includes a lot more in terms of active travel, and we have a specific active travel policy within that. And I think what we must remember is the sustainable economy strategy is bringing together a whole range of actions which will then be delivered through other strategy documents. And key of those is actually the district plan review, as you're all aware. But I think the progress on active travel policy will make a significant difference. The only other point I want to make about the LC whip themselves, we commissioned PJA consultants who are industry experts in preparing LC whips, and in fact have advised the government on their LC whip programme and the changes in the methodology. PJA worked with the 3 towns, and there were a number of engagement exercises. So the town councils were involved in the preparation of those LC whips. We didn't do them in isolation. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I've got a couple of others. I was just going to raise a couple myself, if I may. Just talk about employment, employment sites, and the importance of a high employment rate in Mid-Sussex. Obviously, one of the key objectives is to build the Science and Technology Park, and I was just wondering if it's possible to give any more updates to where we are on that one. And secondly, again, we're a year or so into Opportunity Mid-Sussex, and whether we feel that that's been, I know we've attended a lot of events, but just whether we feel that that's led to any increased awareness and activity like we hoped. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes, we, as you know, we've allocated 48 hectares of space for a science and tech park, and we are working very actively. Lara's team in particular are working very proactively with the 2 landowners involved, and we are confident that they remain committed, and we're supporting them in bringing forward their proposal for a science and tech park. We're supporting them in a number of ways, both in terms of obviously planning advice, but also from an economic development perspective. So we are supporting them by forging introductions and building relationships between them and the government and other bodies, including educational institutions. So we remain confident in our ability to bring that forward. I think Sally wanted to come in on the OMS point.
Yes, we think OMS has been very successful. It's always difficult to devise a metric of success for something like that. And we have looked at hits, we've looked at registrations, we've looked at all those kind of metrics, but they don't actually give you a proper impression of the value. The value of those events has been the networking. So, for example, with the Science and Tech Park, it's been having a fantastic array of partners, business partners, education partners in terms of the universities and industry leaders all working together. And I think that's quite difficult to capture in a metric, but it has been very, very successful. It's been well received by the industry, and actually it's helped us forge better relationships with all those different bodies that I've mentioned.
Thank you very much. Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Referring back to the LC whips, all I'd say from an East Grinstead perspective, as a parish and district councillor, I know in the last council term a lot of hard work and time was spent on developing those plans, and certainly from an East Grinstead perspective, I don't think, unless there were strong comments from the parish, which I don't think there would be, the town council, I wouldn't want those to be brought back in to be reviewed. I would leave it to the process you've already outlined. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. Councillor Bates, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I speak a bit in trepidation of that I sort of said I'd cycle to the site meeting tomorrow at Burgess Hill on a route that is quite feasible. I've ridden it for 60 years. There's a bit of modification needed to make it a bit better for other cyclists. But I would like to concentrate, and I've asked this question, is in the fact that you can't actually walk from Haywards Heath to Burgess Hill on that particular, well, any of the roads really. And I think there's an obligation through the planning of the Brookley to Haywards Heath to have at least a footpath. Now, I relate this to the fact that South Chailey in recent times have built a development at the old brickworks, and part of the agreement was to build a footpath to the South Chailey School, and that was quite a long stretch of path. So I think that we should really be, if we can't provide a cycle path, well, you can cycle from Haywards Heath to Burgess Hill, obviously, but I think at least a footpath needs to be created to allow people to walk between the two towns, and it could actually be encouraged to be wide enough to be a dual footway and cycleway. So, you know, I welcome anybody that wants to join me cycling there tomorrow. But maybe it'll be cancelled, or maybe I'll jump on the bus. We'll never know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bates. I think we'll be with you in spirits, at least, on your journey. I'll see if any of our officers are able to just comment.
Somebody will be saying there's some cyclists holding up.
I'm going to pass, Judy Holmes, thank you.
I mean, I don't think we disagree with that ambition and that aspiration at all. And I think that is something that we would like to see too. We, as you know, had made huge attempts at trying to get some active travel corridor between Haywards Heath and Burgess Hill, and we haven't been able to secure that. But that doesn't mean we won't continue to have that aspiration, and we'll continue to try to improve the connectivity through whatever means we can.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Judy. Councillor Zeidler, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to start, if I may, Chair, since I'm new to the council, by saying what an excellent document I thought the SES was itself in terms of its structure and clarity, and indeed that enabled this report to be in something that, as you say, with 54 actions, to be tracked and managed and reported on very effectively, and I thought that it's an excellent document. Thank you very much for that to the officers first. It's already been raised, and one of the challenges of strategy is, of course, the strategy is set, but things change. We've already talked about one organisation that is no longer, and indeed there are a number of actions here that relate to coast capital and the uncertainty around LEPs. Can I ask if there are sufficient contingencies in terms of how the strategy is likely to be amended to manage that, and indeed if there are any other organisations that officers feel are at risk that were previously intended or expected to be involved in delivery? That would be my first. I have a couple of others, but perhaps I'll come back after you answer that.
Thank you, Councillor. To Judy again, Judy Holmes again. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I mean, we live in an uncertain world, don't we? And we recognise that we must be agile and that we must be able to move swiftly. I think in respect to the larger question, the bigger question around whether there are a number of organisations in this strategy that we rely upon in order to deliver our actions. And I think that there aren't any that we rely on solely to deliver. We will always be able to find another way. So similar to how Lara had explained our response to the community hub issue, we will find another way of delivering that with other partners. With respect to the LEP, that will obviously have an impact for lots nationally, but specifically talking about West Sussex and the other districts and boroughs in West Sussex. And it won't surprise you to know that they are talking to the LEP and the government about what contingencies will need to be in place when they are no longer in existence. And I think for us, the key thing will be that they were the accountable body for some of the funding that we were granted, particularly things like the local growth fund money that we used for the place and connectivity work. And the county council will continue to act in that capacity because we've secured that funding in partnership with the county council. So the LEP disappearing will not have a significant impact on that at all. In terms of how funding comes to us in the future, the LEP was a conduit for some funding streams, but those now will be directly from the government. So we will continue to develop partnerships and work with government departments who do visit us very often, and we do take all opportunities that we can to access funding.
If I may, thank you for that. And maybe I'd suggest in future reports, I mean, obviously within the risk element of this, you don't reflect any of those risks because they're all down as sort of being managed. But I know that managing them doesn't take no effort. And it would probably be quite helpful if those sorts of items somewhere were captured in a way that you could actually see them and that members could therefore understand where those risks lie and how they might develop. So the other couple I had as well, and I'm going on to into some of the detail, so apologies for that. But there was on the towns and the measures of success that were being used as a baseline were town dwell times, which I thought were quite interesting because they don't have any idea about what the relative actual dwell times are. It's just change. And when you see that Burgess Hill is sort of -1, you go, well, that's not too bad. But if I was to talk to anyone who's a resident of Burgess Hill, they'd probably say, well, if you compare dwell time to what it's like in Haywards Heath or somewhere else, maybe it is, but you can't tell. I would think it'd be quite helpful as a metric to perhaps put it in the context of what is maybe expected, and just referring it to its own baseline is not perhaps the best way to do things. There was Also, just on the next page, which, I mean, you can comment on that. The next page was on 27, which was an objective 8, was also based on, totally separately, the rewilding aspects, and it talks about the success that you've had in terms of rewilding. And my question is, and this does reflect local observations and comment, the Allbourne recreational ground, the parish council there think that it's been abandoned and it's just a bunch of brambles, which they complain that when any child kicks a ball into it, they just get stuck in the brambles. And is that really rewilding? Is it successful, that rewilding, and is it really being managed as we anticipated? Because having some centres is all very good, but are they the right sort?
Just on that, Councillor Zeidler, I know I'm probably one of the officers will answer, but we have removed sites in the past because they were near ball games and things, so we have listened to feedback, and I know also we have done quite a few counts and things of wildflowers, and it's quite a pleasant surprise how many different types have been found. So from a personal perspective in the area where I've noticed across the district, I've been very supportive of that campaign, but perhaps one of the officers would like to comment.
I'll start with the dwell time. We had a lot of debate when the SES was being debated about what the correct metric would be, actually at Scrutiny Committee. We do collect data on both footfall and dwell time, and we collect it monthly. And I think our members, at the time we set that as a metric, felt that dwell time would be more appropriate because it was the amount of time that people wanted to spend within a place rather than footfall per se. We've noted the variation in figures, and I'm going to hand to Lara, if that's all right, Chair, in a minute, who will explain why there might be deemed to be some anomalies with this, which relates to the pandemic. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to hand to Lara.
Thank you, Chair. So just a little bit more granularity on the dwell times. I absolutely take your point. It doesn't give a clear idea of what we're comparing it to, so thank you for that point. But just to explain some quite significant variances, and when we've looked in detail at the data, so it's measured in 15-minute chunks. That's how the data is divided up, and it's actually using, I'm not sure quite the right term, mobile phone pings, I'm not entirely sure, but it's using that as reference points, which does give a useful indicator. And that's entirely valid. The reason that we may need to go back and look at exactly how we use that data is during and after the pandemic, as I'm sure we would see in the coming year and following years, is the change in the 3-hour plus, which is unlikely to be dwell time in a shop in terms of what we are trying to capture and understand, and is actually probably people working from home and that working pattern changing. So they are far more dramatic changes than if you were to exclude that that 3-hour plus data. It's actually quite consistent. So it is a factor that we need to look into to really draw out what it is we're trying to reflect in the data. But I do take your point about numbers as well as percentage change. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Laura. And back to Judy. Oh, Rob. Brilliant. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. You actually covered a lot of what I was going to say. So I think that there's a link in the SES report to the end of 2022 analysis that we did around those sites, and the survey data that we actually managed to pull together around the number of species that were seen on some of those sites. Significant increase in flora and fauna. So some of them might not look particularly attractive, and possibly there's a piece of work reflecting on what you're saying around how we better communicate what we're doing and the successes that we're having. But absolutely, they are being monitored, and they're being monitored for for impact in terms of number of flora and fauna, as well as literally just the number of sites that we're providing.
Thank you, Councillor Seidler.
I have
Carry on,
one more, which was actually just a clarification, really, because it was about measures of success and the number of business formation above 65 per 10,000 residents. I think it seemed to have two different numbers under Objective 5 and Objective 9. I think it was one, it was from 65 as a baseline, year 2 is 86.9, and then on page 22, and then on page 30, unless it's two different metrics, it was just talking about new firm formation rate, so it is actually a slightly different thing. We've got a similar baseline and a similar objective. So I think that maybe they're just slightly different things that you're measuring. It was a little confusing. If just comment later, Chair, that would be fine.
Okay. We'll do that then. Thank you very much, Councillor Seidler. I'm still waiting for anyone else to come back if they wish. But just while I see Councillor Hempel now, can I just ask again, Objective 11, deliver enhanced digital infrastructure, which is obviously a big one, and the various projects delivering the fibre. Just do we feel that we're on track with those? The timelines are as we expected, and whether there's, what that might progress into once we've got that initial fibre laid. Thank you. I'm already looking at Simon Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, that is progressing as we expected. What we've seen is a growth in internet service providers coming into the area, and that's partly also a function of the market changing. So we've seen more people coming in. That has its mixed benefits, because sometimes it means more roadworks in order to put in what's called the last mile. So that's the connection from the infrastructure we've put in to premises, businesses or residential. The other area that we're working on jointly with West Sussex and government on is looking at broadband provision in rural areas, and there's currently some work underway with West Sussex mobile phone providers looking at using 5G technology and also satellite technology to enable provision in more rural areas, and we're part of that programme.
Future updates on that. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Hemwood.
Actually, I am interested in the detail, and I do not apologise for that. I'm looking at number section, yes, page 22. Just interest in number 14, where you say supporting a broad range and 2 apprenticeships. So I'm just curious about where these apprenticeships were. On page 22, section 14. Just interested in information.
Thank you, Councillor Hemwood. I'm going to pass to Judy Holmes.
So this is reflecting the grants that we've awarded through the Council's Capital Grants panel. So all of the information relating to the detailed awards to the 45 businesses, the papers will be there. So this is a summary of that. So it's summarising the activity that we've undertaken during 22-23. So the detailed information is available through those papers, but we can certainly send a copy of the papers to you that relates to the apprenticeships, if that's helpful.
Okay. Thank you very much. Chairman, I have a couple more questions. Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to know the criteria for rewilding and the procedure, because last year you had a section in St. John's Park which was rewilded, which was not appropriate at all in the public park. And you did cease that, you cut it, and then you had a section over at Barnside also. And I wonder, what criteria are you using other than, I just noticed you put a rope around it generally, and what procedure you use to rewild it? Do you throw around any wildflower seeds or anything? Thank you very much. What's the procedure?
Thank you. Rob, are you happy if we pass over to yourself? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. The procedure in terms of actually identifying the sites, the criteria has been a bit of a consultative exercise, really. So generally speaking, there's been some work done in the officer team to identify potential sites, and then engagement. I think it was last year or the year before, we sought views from ward councillors on what sites they might like to put forward in their wards. And as you say, some of those sites have been very successful and have continued year after year. Others we have elicited less positive responses, and we've either moved them or downscaled them or changed them in one way or another. In terms of the procedure for rewilding a site, there is some quite clear guidance on the Blue Campaign website around what you should and shouldn't do. And casting seed around is one of the things you shouldn't do, because the idea is absolutely around just leaving them to naturalise and seeing what comes back naturally rather than interfering in it.
Thank you. One more, well, for now, page 28, number 26. This is ever so interesting. Annual biodiversity report looks at what habitats and designations have been impacted by planning applications in the last year. So I'm really interested if we can have access to that, because I think from speaking from a purely parochial point of view, we have lost considerably wild sites in Burgess Hill. So is that accessible, this Sussex biodiversity? Are you with me on, it's number 26, the last little bit? Yeah,
Yep,
thank
I
you.
think Sally Blomfield's going to provide a response.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we're doing a lot of work on the natural capital mapping, and that's part of the work that we're doing within the district plan review. And it's work that's being progressed as part of both the district plan review, but also as part of the green infrastructure parts of the district plan review, and also biodiversity net gain. All of that information will be within the public domain when we go to the Reg 19 version of the district plan, because it's part of that evidence base.
So, excuse me, how far back, how many years back? Is this just going to be from 2023, or how far back will this be, will this mapping of loss of biodiversity, how far back will that go?
Okay, yes, thank you. I mean, it says here in the by planning applications in the last year, but
So it's just 1 year, just
I
the
don't.
last
I
year.
think Sally will confirm, but that's her read. Any other questions or comments? Oh gosh, okay. Councillor Zeidler, please.
Yes, so just going to objective 3. Under the measures, it talks about increasing hourly female earnings to 100% by the end of the strategy period, which is 2025. Our progress so far, 2022, doesn't look like on a path to get there. Will we get there?
Pass that over to Sally Bromfield, thank you.
Again, this was a really interesting discussion that was had when we set these metrics as part of the Scrutiny Committee discussion. And there was a very clear discussion about what should be a stretch target, even though there was an acknowledgement that we weren't likely to be able to hit that figure. But I think our councillors at the time really wanted to put an aspirational figure, because they didn't want to say, actually, it's okay if we have a lower figure or a lower target. But there was a very clear recognition at the time that it was a bit of a tall order. So stretch target, we're doing quite well. But whether we'll get to that magic figure, let's see at the end of year 3. I doubt it, but I think that was accepted when we set the target.
Okay. And just if I may, just on objective 13, and this is really just a confirmation, if I may, Sally, for it's got a number of issues which are the delivery is subject to the draft policies within the draft district plan. If the draft district plan, as drafted currently, is implemented, will all of those be met?
Good question. Yes.
Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Chair. On page 31, section 31, you mentioned EV charging points in new developments. Just anecdotally to tell you that the family have moved in a new development in Burgess Hill, and they've got an EV charging point on the side of their house, and they've bought an EV as a result. So it is wonderful to see that happening, and well done to the planning people for insisting. So that's a positive part. Page 36, para 43, talking here about insulation of buildings in the council's purview. We do have some, it says here home upgrade grant to 8 properties, but it almost looks as if you've only helped 3 houses with the rating F or G. Is that true? And what are we doing about our council housing? We bought some houses now, as I understand it, to prevent homeless people going into bed and breakfast. So are we checking on the insulation of those, for example, and putting panels on them? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eaves. So, Laura, please, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will say I'm going to answer the first part of that. So the F to G rating was the particular focus, absolutely, that those, as it should be, aiming at the worst affected. There were other measures implemented, and there are future funding sources that we are, as a collective, the wider partnership of local authorities that we are working with and through, are aiming to get additional funding because it was oversubscribed. But I suppose as a sign of a successful programme, there wasn't enough funding, but we are aiming to, and we have those details of anyone else who has put themselves forward, should any further funding come available. Thank you.
Thank you. And Simon Hughes to answer the other part of the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we do. We have a housing standard, and that includes things like insulation, double glazed windows, heating, and so on. And so what we do when we acquire a property, we do a survey and look at the works required in order to improve that.
And finally, I think Councillor Zeidler.
Sorry, one more, and this is on objective 4, and it talks about the maintaining the Mid-Sussex life satisfaction score, which has declined against the baseline, which again is perhaps understandable because the baseline was an average from 2012-13 to 19-20, and life has been more difficult since. I'd just be interested to know whether that decline, how that decline sits against other equivalent scores, either regionally or nationally, in terms of how that performance looks.
Thank you, Councillor. Over to Laura again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a slightly abstract scoring. So it estimates life satisfaction, feeling that the things done in life are worthwhile, happiness and anxiety at various spatial changes. So there is no trend. I was looking at the kind of sub-region and the region, and it is very variable. It doesn't seem to have followed a pattern based purely on the pandemic and where you might expect those national impacts to have affected everyone in a similar fashion. So it is quite variable. It has stayed within 7. It has changed in terms of percentage points, but it has stayed within 7 back to 2016, which was the data that was available. So I hope that helps to some extent.
Sounds like it's not particularly useful then.
It shows a steady state overall. So actually, if you can look at it like that for us, rather than comparing necessarily with others, with other neighbouring areas, it shows that we've got that consistency, which in itself can be of value. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other hands up, so I'm going to take this opportunity to close the discussion on this item. We've obviously touched on a lot of the different objectives in various ways. We've been asked to endorse the progress made, which will be just a simple vote to accept the progression. So could I ask that we, as a committee, vote to approve and endorse the progress made? Thank you.
Yeah, but it doesn't work. Oh, sorry, I was pressing the wrong button.
Thank you. So that's been unanimously approved. So thank you very much. And thank you for all the officer comments there as well, which clearly demonstrate a good understanding of where we are on each of those objectives and the individual actions underneath them. Moving on to item 7, Green Spaces Investment, Strategic Vision. And to start this item off, I think we're going to have a presentation from officers from Simon Hughes and Rob Anderson, and perhaps we'll take open the debate up once we've had the presentation. So I'll pass over to Simon and Rob. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. On this item, we want to present our work on our strategic vision and ask the committee to debate and consider it. This is a clear policy issue that offers a strategy that enables us to leverage resources, so whether that's some of our own funding, 106, and external grants to improve our green spaces. And if the committee is happy with it, we'd ask you to endorse it as a long-term strategy for those green spaces, and it's responsibility of the executive to oversee it. So just move on. I think it's easy to just look at a whole set of, maybe not, look at a whole set of figures. There we go. It's, this really is to illustrate a number of things. One is the great green and open spaces that we have and the breadth of them across the district. And you'll see that they provide a range of resources to our communities. And these are all publicly available, and we know how important they are to you and our communities. A good example of that is one that I know we've recently shared with you, and that is the significant growth in people using and going to our play days, for example, which take place on some of our parks. So those are great assets to have, great community facilities to have, but that, with that huge portfolio, it brings the huge demands. We need to maintain them and we need to improve them, and they need to change as the needs of our communities change. And they need to enable us to address changes in climate that we're currently seeing, but also changes in those communities. And you'll see within the report on paragraph 13 about the need for more facilities for teenagers. We're a small council with limited resources, and so the strategy really enables us to use these assets, leverage our understanding of them to bring in that additional funding so we can grow and change and develop them over a period of 10 or so years. So we want to present the work that we've been doing to ensure that we are able to do that over the course of those years and influence the money that we get from development and from other parties to contribute to it. And it really fundamentally enables us to have access to the resources that we know we need and our communities need. It's important to stress that this work provides a blueprint. So it is a blueprint on what our priorities are and provides an evidence base so that as resources become available, we can then deliver those improvements over time. So to give you a perspective on that, why we've got to this point and what we weren't able to do previously. Elapsed local plans, so between the period of about 2011 to 2018, 2018 when the current plan was adopted, we didn't have a 5-year housing supply, and we experienced a period of speculative development, and that made it extremely difficult to leverage in investment for our parks and open spaces through 106s. We're not in that position now, but in order to leverage in that investment, we need a sound evidence base so that we can make that case within 106 and to other funding bodies like Sports England and so on. Added to that, we had an incomplete asset management data. And as you all know, that's important so that you can understand how long certain equipment's likely to last, how successful the work that you've put in has been in terms of attendance and usage, and therefore marrying both the strategy and that asset management plan, we can now come up with a 10-year plan to deliver improvements in our parks and open spaces over that period. So in June 2018, the Council worked with Ethos Environmental Planning, so consultants in this area, and we updated our playing pitches and playing amenity green spaces information. So a lot of surveys were done, a lot of information was sought about those green spaces, and we've merged those together to produce a vision. That's what's before you at the moment. And both studies sought to provide a policy framework so that we could put together what the proposed future development and investment would need to be across the district. Critically, and I really can't emphasise this enough, is it serves as an evidence base for saying what we need from 106 contributions and from other funding to support those improvements. So it's a blueprint for when resources become available to improve and modernise and maintain our parks and open spaces. So just to move on, so this is just taking you through a timeline. So we've had the playing pitch strategies and the amenity green space and play study in 2019. We've then had the Parks Improvement Programme and the Parks Master Plans, which Rob is going to talk about in the next few slides. And those master plans were designed to bridge the gap between the reviews that we did and the development of these studies and their likely implementation. So that's to bridge the gap through the COVID period so we could get to an overarching longer-term strategy, which, as you know, a long-term strategy enables us to plan and it enables us to review something over that period of time. So, Rob.
Thanks, Simon. So, yeah, as Simon says, the Parks Investment Programme was kind of a mechanism to bridge the gap between our historic approach and what we're presenting to you today. And it really sought to establish that new discipline around developing a strategic approach to the way in which we manage our and develop our green spaces. Sort of positive and far-sighted development. So it's aiming at ensuring that the important resources that we've got in our communities benefit from a systematic and evidence-based approach to investment, rather than perhaps the more ad hoc approach that was taken historically. So to date, the Parks Investment Programme has seen the creation of master plans for 6 sites across the district, 6 key parks, and those designs were produced on the back of extensive consultation with the local community, and they've culminated, as Simon was alluding to, in a blueprint for development. So each of those sites, we have a plan that we can now take forward and use to secure investment to deliver over the coming years. So provisional costings were first obtained for these in 2020 for the first 3 of these sites, and they did include some assessments around inflation. Clearly, we know what's happened to inflation over the last couple of years. We did secure some funding through Section 106 and through general reserves, and that was approved back in March 2022. And then subsequently to that, Mid Sussex was successful in securing £1 million worth of UK shared prosperity funding, of which some has been allocated to the delivery of the first 3 of these master plans. So the first 3 are Hemsley's Meadow in East Pottage, Mount Noddy in East Grinstead, and Victoria Park here in Haywards Heath. And we now have final costed designs for those 3 sites. They've been reviewed and those final designs have been agreed, and we have a funding strategy for those 3 sites provided that they don't come in significantly over the latest cost estimates. The first three designs for those first three sites are due to be submitted for planning application for planning consent imminently, with the aim of getting them to planning committee in January. And then the aim is that we appoint contractors and hope to start on site with the implementation of those first three in the spring or summer of next year. Of course, again, depending on the costs coming in within the budget envelope that we've been working to. So I think that then takes us on to the piece of work that we're really talking about today, which is the 10-year vision for how we're going to actually enshrine this new way of working into our day-to-day investment decisions and practices. So we started work on this approach a couple of years ago. It was delayed through COVID, but it's been sort of progressed as capacity has allowed. And it proposes a prioritised investment programme in line with available funding across all our parks, open spaces, sports pitches and play areas through a range of individual improvement projects and park master plans for some of our more significant sites. Now to the rub, which as Simon was talking about, is the money. Of course, what we've got here is we've got for the first time a really detailed idea of what needs to happen and a sense of its relative priority to other sites. However, all of that is dependent upon the funding coming forward. We have, in order to ensure that we can deliver some early wins here, we've sought to prioritise where we can projects that have got Section 106 either already secured or Section 106 in the pipeline. And then we're also exploring the scope to renegotiate and reallocate some elements of Section 106 where there are projects that are further down the list that we want to bring forward the funding for. We're looking to set sort of aspirational targets for 106 for some of our later projects, so sort of looking at what development might come through down the pipeline and how we can secure that 106 to deliver projects. And then of course we need to look at external funding opportunities. So obviously we've benefited from some UK shared prosperity funding recently, but there's also a number of our sites that are identified in the local football facilities priority list, for example. So potential candidates for Football Foundation funding. There's always new lottery funding streams being promoted and so on. But also looking at things like sponsorship and crowdfunding. And then clearly, if we are unable to secure the necessary funding through all those means, we'll then be looking at, okay, so how do we perhaps value engineer this scheme? How do we perhaps phase it over a number of years? So I think really the key is that this, whilst clearly we are looking to deliver a number of projects over the coming years, that is all very much dependent upon funding. And what this does is gives us the evidence base to actually start securing that funding, primarily through the planning process. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Rob, for those slides and the presentation. Over to us as the committee councillors now. Does anybody have any comments in the paper in front of them or in respect to the presentation that we've just received? Councillor Bates, please.
Make a contribution, Mr. Chairman. In this respect of the playgrounds, I'm fortunate I have Victoria Park in my ward, but there are other play areas in the ward which I think are not fit for purpose. So I think we need to try and bring up standard of all of the other playgrounds in the area for sure. I think there should be a minimum standard for sure. One thing I did pick up through a parish council, which is now in my ward, is that they asked that the district council could have a package of bringing in equipment for their play areas at a lower cost, you know, by going out and going into the market and bringing a big contract, rather than them having to pay individually for all of the equipment at a higher price. So I would like the council to look into that and report back on it.
Thank you, Councillor. Simon, it's over to Simon. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pick up on the parish council procurement question in the first place, if that's okay. We can certainly talk to parishes about procurement. There are a lot of frameworks available where you can procure equipment where the costs are already specified, and that's always a good way to go. So it might be that they're not aware of those. In terms of our procurement and how much is being procured over time, that very much depends on the projects that we have in flight. So procurement not necessarily the case that procuring more play equipment, for example, is necessarily cheaper, especially at the moment, unfortunately. They are costly, and that goes without saying, partly because of their use. They're outdoors, they need to be maintained, and they need to be maintained for quite some time. We're quite happy to talk to parishes, and in fact I'm meeting parishes tomorrow, where I'm sure that question will come up and I can answer it then.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Councillor Peacock, please.
I'd like to speak, but I think Councillor Hitchcock has a follow-up question or comment on the last question.
Yes, it's to do with the cost of equipment. When I was at Worth Parish for the last 8 years, we saw a significant decline in the number of providers of equipment and spare parts, and a lot of equipment became obsolete. It was still working, but it became obsolete. And I think the number of suppliers in the marketplace now are few. So my question is, do you think that the way in which we're looking at procurement is getting us the best value for money for this council? Thank you.
Thank you. You're absolutely right, and part of the decline in the market and availability of equipment is because the market changes, there are acquisitions, and then it tends to zero in on fewer market suppliers. But that's something we absolutely do look at in procurement, and key to that is our ability to maintain equipment. And so in some cases, what some of the frameworks look at is the amount of spare parts that particular provider keeps in stock, for example. So that you can see the life cycle of a piece of equipment and their ability to maintain and replace it. And then the other factor, which frankly is attention, is the degree to which it's specialist and the degree to which it's more general equipment, where actually specialist parts aren't necessarily required, and that then helps repairs. But it isn't. We aren't necessarily, we do acquire that from the market. We don't provide that ourselves. So it is very much dependent on how the market is placed, but fewer providers that have a larger share of the market are tending to remain and be resilient. So we do take that into account.
Thank you. So back to Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I welcome this. I think it's good to see this piece of work obviously started in the last council. I believe you were cabinet member responsible for it. I think we do need it. We have a number of green spaces. We need a long-term strategy to ensure we continue to invest in them, and they're actually spaces that our residents want to use. Looking to Mount Noddy, speaking about a site in East Grinstead, when will the plans be made public? Because I know particularly the Bowls Club were not enthusiastic, shall we say, about the original plan, which involved removing the end hedge, which I believe, Mr. Anderton, you said was not now happening. A new plan had been put in place, or a redesign, shall we say. Just wondering, when will that new design be in the public domain so people can comment on it? Thank you.
To Rob. Yep. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as I said, the master planning process was an iterative process that involved a lot of public consultation, and we've sought to respond to all the feedback that we've had from site users and residents and so on. So the Bowls Club being a prime example where we've engaged with them and we've sought to address their concerns. The final plans will be made public within the next few weeks on the basis that they will be coming through the planning process. So we'll be seeking planning consent for those first 3 schemes, during which time, by virtue of the fact that they're going through planning, they will be public.
Thank you. Councillor Henwood, please.
Sorry. I just address my remarks to the report, and I'm item number 11, when you talk about key objectives, about what you'd like to, I would like to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 6th objective, and I'm sure it's not just Burgess Hill Town Council, but to engage with local communities. And in the instance, the very parochial instance of St. John's Park, which has been a master plan, which was produced several years ago, and we know things have changed. And I think it would be not just Burgess Hill, but several communities might like to engage actively with the officers when they're looking at these master plans for their parks, us knowing our citizens, we live there. So I would like to suggest that as an objective under number 11, just to put that in. I've got something else, some more questions.
Yeah, do you want to?
I mean,
well, just on that one.
Can I have a response? Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, well, just
Have
on
a
that one,
response.
I was a cabinet member, I know Councillor Hobbs now, but when you've had public engagement, there's always been tents and things in the parks, and councillors have been very welcome to come and make their views known alongside. So I'm sure that's something you'll be continuing to do, but I'll pass over to Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, all the any investment in our parks and open spaces, whether it's an individual play area or a site master plan, is always developed in consultation with the local community and through engagement with local councillors too. And as Councillor Belsey says, we did have events on site. We also have an online presence, so we have an engagement hub where residents can go and actively engage in the process of developing the plans for those sites.
Chairman, I suppose my comment really is related to a master plan that probably came out 3-4 years ago, and the whole communities have changed, populations have changed, and I feel that it should be kind of engaged up to date. This is what I'm really asking. In our instance, I'm sure other communities, we're not on the board to be done quickly, so that's my request, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as we said, and the example was Matt Noddy, that there's lots of engagement that takes place. And one of the tensions is that as we work through the master plan, there's some initial engagement that we then need to work on. We need to know what's feasible, what's deliverable. And then also there's the engagement ultimately at the other end, which is through the planning process. And then that is further engagement with communities and formal engagement as to what can be approved and not by planning. So we don't stop engagement at the start. We know it changes, and the very purpose of this strategy, and I think it was talked about earlier in terms of our sustainable economic strategy, is we know that it changes over time. So we know, and again, we've highlighted that in the report. So we know, for example, that participation in sports changes over time. So it would be no good us consulting 4 years ago and then delivering what was decided 4 years ago. We reconsult and we understand that. But we also need to have something that helps inform what we negotiate through 106. So I'm confident that in terms of our consultation, that's something that we really do engage in, and indeed we're consulting with you at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Do you want to carry on, Councillor?
Yes, I think I was, yes, I was a bit concerned. I'm looking at Well, let me find it, if somebody else wants to ask their question.
We'll come back to you.
Yes, please, thank you,
Councillor
Chairman,
Hamilton.
thank
Councillor
you.
Hicks, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of this is a structured investment programme, but I just wonder where ad hoc individual issues relating to the parks comes into in terms of if play equipment needs replacing or if there's particular substantial maintenance issues that need to be addressed outside of this programme and outside of maybe Section 106 funding. So where that comes in and just a reassurance that that won't be squeezed out, because that's probably more important in terms of meeting the ad hoc needs than the long-term plan. Also, just to have a bit more discussion about the Tier 4 parks and how we will review their feasibility going forward, particularly in terms of what consultation there will be. And presumably, we haven't got a target for parks to be removed or replaced, and it may well come back that the majority of those continue to be Tier 4 parks that we want to service and take forward as an authority.
Thank you, Councillor Hicks. Simon.
Thank you. I'll pick up the first part of your first question and then your second question, if that's okay. So in terms of maintenance and repairs, that's something we continue to do. What I would say, though, is the point of taking an asset management approach is that that then tells us the lifespan of the equipment that we have in the park, so we can do much better procurement, and we could actually understand when failure is likely to occur, so we can move in more quickly. So that's the whole point of an asset management approach. So it's a good point that you raise, a useful point. On the Tier 4, that's work that we want to undertake, to look at Tier 4s, to look at how they're used, to look at what the opportunities are for them, and we would do that again in consultation with local councillors and local people.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on, you don't have a target though in terms of, there's still a commitment to Tier 4 parks, maybe at a different level of numbers, but...
Yeah, well, the purpose of looking at them is to understand what their usage is, how many people use them. Could that space be used more effectively for people? So in some areas, we know other authorities that have turned some spaces into things like orchards, for example. So it's really, because if there's one piece of play equipment that isn't used, then that space isn't great for the community. So there's a whole range of things that we want to consider, but that's what we're seeking approval really through the strategy, is to look at those spaces and identify some options.
Thank you. Councillor Zeidler, please.
Yes, thank you. It's a couple of things. Firstly, I know that, and I was actually unable to find the two reports that you mentioned online. I know they wasn't provided as background documents and hyperlinked, and I actually wasn't able to find them, which would have been helpful perhaps for that to give it context. And I know we're being asked to endorse the principles, which I assume are the points in 11. That's effectively where we are. I think generally for the playing fields, I feel that it's, it makes sense the way that things have been progressed and the implementation plan is referenced. Also, I think the master planning approach for larger groups is clearly sensible, and as is referenced an awful lot through this report, as funds allow, seems to be the mantra. I'd be very interested to know what is the actual requirement if you took off the need to limit it to funds, so we have some idea of actually what it would cost if we could do what we think we needed to do. That doesn't seem to have a reference at all, so we can't see what the gap is, although I recognise we don't have a way to fund it either, but it would be interesting to have that. The second point, which I think you will appreciate, since I represent downland villages, and in this I'm making a comment for all the villages, and if we look at our district plan, we characterise Mid-Sussex as an area of small villages with some large towns. This does very well for towns, But villages, particularly if they're protected and if they're in AONB or if they're in national parks, won't generate huge amounts of Section 106 for a start, because you won't build anything there. And there's sort of a real chicken and egg here for support and provision into our villages. And I don't see that this strategy actually recognises how to address that. Now, that's not that we dream up a magic money tree and find a way to just sort of say yes. That clearly isn't sensible. And I know that the officers have been trying to help locally in pointing communities to available additional funds, and you did reference that in your note. I think would be a very helpful addition to the strategy if it recognised that situation, that there are some here that, you know, they come in as tier 2, 3, because they're in the middle of nowhere, so there is nowhere else close, so they're not going to be part of a tier 4 study, but need some slightly more active assistance for what are often quite small parishes to try and get some of the funding that they need to get themselves off the ground and make the repairs that are necessary. And I don't think that that's been adequately considered and reflected in this.
Thank you. Councillor Zeidler.
So if I can...
Yeah, I'll through over to Simon on Rob.
Rob will pick up the question. I can pick up the question about villages.
So I think in respect to question 1, which is really around what is the actual requirement if funds were no question, I think we haven't sought to quantify that, because I think the premise of this is all around securing those funds. So really this is a list of our priorities that we hope will enable us to access the necessary funds through the planning process. So we haven't done a gap analysis, if you like.
And then we'll pass over to, if I let Simon finish, and then Councillor Zeidler come back if you wish.
Thank you. And your question about villages in tier 2 and 3, as you'll see, as it says around that particular tier, one of the things that we are looking at is where there's no access to other play facilities. So we do understand the need for play areas in villages. And what we will do, we talk to parish councils about provisioning those and what sort of equipment or how they're maintained and those sorts of issues. So that's not something that we are looking to neglect at all. A characteristic of Mid Sussex is its diversity in terms of both its urban areas and its rural areas, and that's what we're trying to reflect in the strategy.
If I may just come back on that, and I don't wish to bring specifics, but they do inform the general position, and it reflects how much money is available, is that that's a very long time to wait for the smaller villages on our restricted funding model, and some other ways to help them accelerate prioritisation is, I think, what I would suggest would be more helpful than where we currently are, just saying, well, we'll see what we can do. That's...
Thank you, Chairman. And that's why when in the report, we identify different funding sources. So we've been successful in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. There are lots of other funding sources that we can access that are particularly targeted at rural communities. So that's, again, something we wish to do. There's also the ability, as you'll know, about parishes' ability to precept and actually add to that income. And that's something that we would talk to parishes about as well.
Thank you, Councillor Zeidler. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Hemlett.
Oh, sorry, I was up there. You keep erasing me. I want to address my remarks to number 25, play area review, where I understand during COVID, you did a desk-based assessment of which play areas were considered to be of lower value. So you put these into these tiers. So tier 4, for instance, it wasn't anything to do with the size, but was it to do with usage? Because, speaking from, yet again, a very parochial point of view, and I'm ever so pleased you will consult with us when you talk about the tier 4s as councillors, because this particular one, which was probably tier 4, would have given a false assessment of its value to the community if you had done a desktop study? And was that just based on size or usage?
If that's all right with Councillor Henwood, I'll ask Rob to provide a response.
Thank you.
So, Chairman, thank you. The assessment we did during COVID was a quick desk-based assessment because we had to make some very quick decisions around our operational approach to our play areas. What we're proposing is to use that as the basis for and the springboard for a more detailed assessment of those sites now. So we did look at them in terms of their size, where they were of limited play value, and there is a definition of that in terms of the range of facilities that are offered and so on, and where there are other better play areas within walking distance. So that was the basis of the assessment back in COVID. But what we will obviously do to enhance that piece of work is the piece around local community engagement and actually getting a proper understanding of how those sites are used.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peacock, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just going through the document, I notice East Grinstead, Mindlesheim Avenue playground isn't listed. It's good to see there are many from East Grinstead earmarked in the document. Is that by a different name, or it's not included? Because there have been some residents commenting on one piece of equipment that's broken, and when would that be updated? So how does that fit in with this plan, the timescale?
Sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, Chairman. I think I would need to come back to you offline about Middleheim play area. The schedule that you've got here is only the top 4 or 5 sets of priorities. If it's about a piece of maintenance rather than a fundamental redesign or rebuild of a play area, then that goes back to Simon's point around the fact that we are not suggesting here that we're going to stop routine maintenance. We're still going to continue to inspect our play areas and respond to maintenance issues as they arise.
Thank you, Councillor Peacock. From my perspective, just one of the questions would be, obviously there's a lot covered in this document with parks, playgrounds and playing pitches as well. I know some of our sports clubs just sort of got just concerns that they are continue to be consulted with, and then the current needs, I think it's like current needs assessed, as well as sort of previous studies, just to give some reassurance that we are focused on sports pitches. We'll be involving them with future investments and making sure that they're in the right places for our current needs, and that in the meantime we will carry on working with them with the pitches that we've currently got, whilst we also look for the future. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I can certainly give you that reassurance, and both myself and Rob have been talking to sports clubs a lot over the last probably 3 months or so. So that's something we continue to do, because one of the things that we want to achieve is earlier consultation with them and earlier discussion with them, because that then enables us to use our resources more effectively and address any concerns they have. So clearly, talking to them and understanding their needs is critical.
Thank you. And just on that, I particularly welcome the master plan for St John's Park, which includes the pavilion improvements as well as part of the wider upgrades. And in one respect, I was wondering whether it's a bit strange to have this whole paper when it doesn't acknowledge the Centre for Outdoor Sports, which is coming as well, which, as we know, is quite an essential plank of council coming forward. And we're talking about some of the challenges for funding and financing, but obviously alongside this set of priorities, we've also got that moving forwards as well, and that is unchanged in respect of this report. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's right. It's still going ahead, and we're currently in the design phase. We've just been to planning to get some feedback on the design, so that's proceeding.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other hands or questions raised, so we're asked to, We're asked to endorse the principles of strategic vision for the delivery of the playing pitch and play and amenity green space studies. And we're also asked to endorse the review over the coming 12 months of the Tier 4 play areas. I'm sure officers will pick up on all the comments made this evening in those considerations. So if we could vote accordingly, please. So that's again voted unanimously. So thank you again, officers, for the presentation, and thank you, committee, for all the comments. Moving on to agenda item 8, which is our work programme. The recommendations are in front of us in terms of confirming the work programme. I'm just going to ask, I know it says it's Kevin, but it's Louise who's going to speak in respect of this item. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll keep this brief. So the work programme just sets out the specific topics that are to come to this committee and a range of other tools that are available to you so that we can cover all the issues that you raised with us that you would like to discuss. And you'll know that I sent you a short note a couple of weeks ago indicating a schedule for things like briefing notes to come out to you. And the idea of that is to protect this committee's valuable time to debate issues and shape policy that they may then sort of offer their advice to the executive. So happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. Councillor Hemwood, please.
Are these listed in priority?
Sorry.
Are these listed in priority?
Are which items listed in?
Well, I've got plan making, and underneath I have Burgess Hill Town Centre and Burgess Hill Growth Area. And given that we had -1 footfall in Burgess Hill, I just wondered if that really did indicate it was second on the list.
No, the idea is that matters come to the scrutiny when there's something that we would seek you to scrutinise.
So I think table paragraph 18, I think, so it sets that out, doesn't it? So,
Yes, it does.
yeah, I don't think we should draw too much inference from the items on paragraph 5.
No, there's no town centre. Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Do we have any other comments? Councillor Eaves, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm wondering why we would invite the energy companies and how useful that might be. I'm not entirely convinced. Has somebody asked for this? Or... Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Eaves, it was a request made by this committee to invite them in the same way that we did the water companies to sort of try to use our influence as much as we can.
And Councillor Hitchcock, please.
Yeah. I did ask through Jenny Edwards to pose a question tonight, but she's not here, so I'll ask it myself. It's to do with the work that we did looking at Reg 18 and pushing on to Reg 19 as a working party. And one of the little bête noirs that crept up once or twice was the transport model. And the transport model is some mythical thing, which seems to have a significant influence on plan making and planning decisions. So I'd like to know, and you don't have to answer these questions now because it may be that a conversation with you will suffice, but I'd like to know who owns the model. Is there a cut-off level of the number of properties per site at which the plan making process does not use the model? In the planning application process, is the information from the model compared with the information supplied by developers? And if so, is the information compatible? And when was the last transport model data published? And is it still relevant to today's plan making?
Sorry, looking at Judy Holmes, sorry, thank you.
Very long question.
You'll be really pleased to know that the next time we meet as a scrutiny committee, we will be talking about exactly those things, because we will be, with the fair wind, bringing our Regulation 19 plan to this committee for scrutiny. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for you to ask those questions in respect to that. But in terms of the detailed questions, you'll be able to ask them at the scrutiny. But to your bigger points, the council owns the transport model. There is no cut-off, and it's an iterative process, so it is constantly updated.
Okay.
Thank you, Judy. And Councillor Zeidler.
Just to pick up on that point, it is the county council, isn't it, who undertakes the modelling, or is it the district council? I think it's the county council, or is it?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually Sistra, our consultants, and it's a model that both county and ourselves have access to. We own it.
Thank you. And Councillor Avery, please.
Yeah, just one question. In terms of reviewing the Reg 19, there's been a lot of work done on behalf, by the working group, etc., etc. So, and there was a meeting on the September the 12th. So, presumably, all the notes and comments which have been taken on board, and that has been addressed in the document that we'll be seeing on November the 22nd. Yeah. And I'm just wondering how far in advance we'll have the opportunity to see that document, put people under more pressure, but, so that we can give us some thought and come fully armed with questions and matters that we need to bring up on the 22nd of November.
So the papers will be published, I think, 10 working days before the meeting. There'll be plenty of opportunity for scrutiny to consider it, and then of course it will need to go to council, so there'll be further opportunity for it to be discussed at council, and we're planning to set up a working group for all district council members between the scrutiny meeting and the council meeting, in order to give you all an opportunity. So colleagues who aren't actually on this committee will also have an opportunity to be brought up to speed and have had the benefit of all the discussions that the working group will have had as well in that workshop.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no further questions, so let's move to the recommendations. They're set out on page 51, 3 points basically confirming the work programme for the municipal year for 23, 24 and beyond. So if we are happy to confirm those with a vote, please. So thank you very much. That's unanimously voted again for the third time this evening. So thank you very much, committee. Item 9, questions pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 10.2, due notice of which has been given. Have none. So I'm pleased to close the meeting. Thank you everybody for their contributions this evening at 8:33. Thank you.